Welcome. I'm glad that you clicked back in. This is Zen Archer, and this is part 2 of kind of who I am. And probably part 3 will be my take on the whole YouTube experience. So, to pick up where I left off, at 40 years old, around that age, I got divorced. I had a traumatic experience going through the divorce, worrying about myself, and so on and so forth. When I was the age that Super Loser is now, approximately his age, I was a computer tech. I had gone through college at a local community college and taken a computer. Originally, I took computer programming, which I changed to computer keyboarding, which I changed to computer science. And I was a part-time student for a while, as well as a full-time student, while married and working in industrial security, working in surveillance and investigation work later on, and working as a supervisor for a security agency later on after that. I've done a lot of things. I've done everything from run punch press and lathe to build cabinets for the likes of Carolina Turkey. I've worked for Dow Jones, running machinery there. But when I worked as a computer tech, we networked. The internet became available to people, and the company that I worked for networked one of the second library system in our area. We networked 21 computers together, ran the wires, put in the computers, sold them the computers, and trained the librarians how to use those computers in order to do searches, because it was very different than what they had learned becoming librarians. And I taught the librarians how to do a search on the net. And right about that time was when the first visual browser came out, called Mosaic. It was released in the public domain, and Netscape and Windows grabbed hold of it and ran and had their battle with it. So I was running a bulletin board at the time, which is, just think of it, if you don't know what a bulletin board is, think of it like a mini CompuServe or AOL, where people would call into my computer. They would log in, leave messages for one another, trade files and pictures and all kinds of stuff. It was a subscription service. And when the internet became available, the first thing we did was provided free email to our users, and then we eventually moved that system over to the internet, and that became a place called Deer Hunter's Cove. And investigating software, we found a product called CUCME, and we put up one of the first CUCME reflectors, which was a video chat room. Now, you couldn't talk then, but you could type and you could see people, up to 10 screens at a time. And so I did that, and I had one of the first video cameras online that was kind of a YouTube-ish thing. It was a look into Deer Hunter's home, and it was set up in the living room or dining room, so you could see the dining room and living room, and you could log in and see me, watching television, eating dinner, or whatever I happened to be doing, and you could beat me and go, "Hey, Deer Hunter." And I would go over and sit down and answer sometimes, or sometimes I would just set it to take messages. So I did that. So that's what I was doing when I was your age. Is I was a techie geek with a cam on the internet, which never really became very popular. I had probably 300 subscribers or so, but that was about it, and that worked for me. I've never really been interested in fame, even today. I don't want the responsibility of it. So that's kind of where I was when I got my divorce. And lost my head and went through my second childhood. And I bought a nice car, a hot rod, and got myself a Kawasaki motorcycle, and discovered what it was like to be on the road. At 40 years old, I discovered motorcycles and found out how freeing rolling down the road with that 2 wheels underneath you and being in the environment was. And I wrestled with my spirituality and tried to find out try to define what it was I believed and search for the truth, the universal truth, the truth about what the world is, and who is God, and where do we go from here, and why is the world seem to be headed in the toilet, and I think that's where a lot of my tolerance came from. Was during those years learning that I was discovering different lifestyles. There were people that, when I was with the girl who managed a bar, it was a new environment for me. I wasn't the kind of person that hung out in bars, and I found myself in a bar almost every night, drinking beer, shooting pool, shooting darts, having a good time for the most part, but discovering that a lot of the people there, they didn't have any family. Their family was either gone, or their family had abandoned them, or they abandoned their family, and that this group of friends ended up being a family and supported one another. If this one needed $20 and that one had it, he said, "Here, take it," and they paid him back. And I wasn't aware of friendships like that. I wasn't aware of that whole dynamic, because it had never been a part of mine. And so the world opened up to me, after my divorce, and I started discovering that, my view was not the only view, and the way that I did things was not the only way, and that they were equal. That, their family of friends was every bit as much a family as my real family was to me, and that it was equal. And that's when I discovered that, we're all the same. We all go to the bathroom, we all eat, some of us are fat, some of us are worried about how we look, but we're all the same. And some of us are better at playing guitar than other ones. Some of us are better at mathematics than other ones. Some of us are better at writing or at poetry than other ones. Some of us are creative. Some of us are intellectual. Some of us are both things combined. But when it all comes out in the wash, you are no different than I am, and I am no different than you are. And it was that realization that also helped me spiritually. My disbelief or my new belief in my whole God structure also took a huge weight off my shoulders. I was no longer worried about retribution because, I smoked cigarettes and drank alcohol and got tight with a young lady once in a while. I didn't worry about it, that I was going to go to hell. So where I'm at, I don't usually tell my religious beliefs out here, but because I was asked, I will. I am not preaching to you, and I completely support you in whatever religion you happen to be, whatever you happen to believe. You believe it for the reasons you do, and that's good for you. And I'm not taking anything away from that. And the Zen lifestyle does not mean that you have to give any of that up. The Zen that I talk about doesn't mean you have to give any of that up. Finding balance and a compass in your life. If opening up the Bible and reading a passage helps you adjust your compass, that's a Zen thing. So it doesn't mean what I believe doesn't take any of that away. But I'm not a believer in God and in any God. So as a result of that, I believe that when it's over, it's over. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits. I don't no God, and if there's no God, then there's no Satan. So I'm not a Satan worshiper. I'm not pagan in that way. Or I shouldn't say pagan. I should say I'm not a Satan worshiper. So that's kind of where I'm at in my life. And with all of that taken off of me, then I can look at myself and say, what are you doing to make the world a better place? This blog here is one of the things that I do to make the world a better place. To try to preach, if you will, understanding and tolerance, and that it's wrong to attack someone who has done nothing to you just because it makes you feel better or because it makes your friends laugh. It's just wrong. And it's counterproductive. And if that's what you do, and if that's what you surround yourself with, and you wonder why your life is headed to the trash can, It's because you're steering it there. And that's the truth. If you believe it or not, that is the truth. If hate and destruction and everybody sucks is what you're about, if you say everybody sucks, that means you. And you're steering yourself into that. Also, I believe that anything that you do in the world affects the world. The fact that I light a cigarette, or, let me give you an example. I've got a box of matches here. This is a very small thing. That just affected the world. How is that possible? Well, first of all, I use this match, and that means that another match is going to have to be produced if I'm going to continue to use matches, or other people are. The match came from a tree, which had to be cut down and made into matches. There's sulfur at the end of this match, and when I lit it, the sulfur went into the air. A lot of people light a match in order to clean the air. And that sulfur went into the air. Well, it's only in my room right now, but eventually that sulfur will get out into the air, and it will contribute to the total amount of sulfur in the air. And the total amount of sulfur in the air will have an impact on the layers of air around the Earth. And the layers of air around the Earth will have an impact on the ozone layer. And the ozone layer and the holes in the ozone layer will have effect on global climate. And the global climate will have an effect on the weather that we see. And I'm not saying that this is a direct cause, but you will notice that the weather seems to be really changing now, and a lot of people point to, well, it's because of the stuff we're doing. But that affects that. And that weather affects the people of the world. And it kills people, and it gives people food, and the fact that I'm breathing, and when I breathe out, makes carbon monoxide that the plants use to make chlorophyll to grow. The smallest thing you do, taking a breath, affects the world. When you realize that in your head, that although it's minute, it affects the world, then you start to try to do things that are beneficial to the world. You're not always successful. Sometimes the things you think are good are bad things. Australia has had all kinds of problems more than once because they introduce a species to take care of a problem they have, not realizing that when they introduce that species into their environment, there's no natural predator to keep the population of that species down, and then that species becomes a problem. Their intention was good, their intention was right, but it got out of hand. And when you take that concept and you bring it down to your everyday life, you start trying to do things that are beneficial to the world and to everyone, and trying to change that for better and make this a better place to live, and help there be an earth for your grandchildren and their grandchildren, and help the planet and help people in general. And that's a noble cause. You know, if the purpose of man on the earth were, and I'm not saying that it is, but if the purpose of man on the earth were nothing more than procreation, then what I'm saying is a good thing. That's the end of part 2. And I'll go on to part 3 and talk about the YouTube experience. So, once again, thank you for watching. I hope you'll pop into that 3rd episode. And until then, be well.